Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered why some people seem to breeze through complicated sentences while others stumble? Well, today we're diving into a huge study that tackles exactly that, individual differences in how we understand language. Imagine reading a tricky sentence. For me, it might be easy, but for someone else, it might be a real brain bender. Scientists have been trying to figure out why these differences happen. Are we all just wired differently in our brains? Or does it come down to how much we've read or learned over the years? This study dives deep into those questions. So, there are two main ideas scientists have about why we're all different when it comes to understanding sentences. One idea is called domain general. This suggests that our differences in understanding language come from our general brain power, things like how good our memory is or how well we can focus. The other idea is experience-based. This theory says it's all about what we've learned from reading and hearing language, especially complex stuff. Over our lives, the more you've been exposed to certain sentence structures, the better you get at them. The problem is, past research hasn't always given a clear answer. Sometimes it seems like general brain power matters, and sometimes it seems like experience is the key. But many of these studies weren't really set up to give us solid answers. They often had too few people, not enough examples of sentences to test, and the ways they measured things weren't super reliable. That is where this new, massive study comes in. The researchers wanted to do it right. They gathered over 300 people, which is a lot for this type of study. They also created many more example sentences, and used a really cool technique called self-paced reading. Think of self-paced reading like this. You are reading a sentence on a computer screen, and each word appears one at a time. You control when the next word shows up by pressing a button. Scientists then measure exactly how long you spend on each word. If you slow down on a particular word or phrase, it suggests you are finding it a bit tricky to process. This helps them pinpoint the exact spots in a sentence that cause trouble. To really test their ideas, they didn't just measure reading speed, they gave participants a whole bunch of tests, 18 of them, covering 6 different areas. These included tests for working memory, attention, vocabulary, and how much people read. This gave them a very detailed picture of each person's cognitive abilities and language experience. So, what did they find? Well, first, they did see the expected patterns. On average, people did slow down on certain types of sentences that are known to be tricky, like those with relative clauses. You know, sentences like, the reporter who attacked the senator ignored the president, versus the reporter who the senator attacked ignored the president. The second one is usually harder for most people. They also saw that as people get older, these differences in processing can become more pronounced. Here is the really interesting and surprising part. While they tested if things like memory and reading experience affected how quickly people read tricky sentences, they didn't find much of a connection. It seems like your general brain power and how much you read didn't change how fast you process these sentences. But they did find a connection when it came to what people understood their comprehension accuracy. So while your reading speed might not change much based on your cognitive skills, your ability to correctly answer questions about the sentence could be influenced by things like your working memory or how much you've read. This is a big deal because it challenges some older, very influential studies that suggested general cognitive skills directly affected reading speed for complex sentences. Another huge takeaway is about how consistent these effects are for individuals. Even though they saw patterns at the group level, meaning on average people slowed down on certain sentences, when they looked at individuals, they found that for many people these effects weren't very stable or reliable. It turns out only a small percentage of people consistently showed the exact same syntactic effect when reading. This means that what we see as a consistent pattern in a group might not be so consistent for each person. This hints at the bigger problem in psychology research called the group-to-individual generalizability problem. Basically, what's true for the average person in a study might not be true for you or me. We can't always assume that what we find in a group will apply to every single person. One explanation the researchers propose is that maybe the brain systems used for understanding language are actually quite separate from the brain systems used for general cognitive tasks like memory and attention. So even if you are great at memory, that doesn't automatically make you better at understanding complex sentences, at least not in terms of speed. Another idea is that maybe the same brain functions are involved, but they're used in different ways when you are doing a memory test versus when you are reading. They might be recruited differently, which could explain why a score on a memory test doesn't directly translate to how fast you read a tricky sentence. This difference in how brain functions are deployed might also explain why they did see connections with comprehension accuracy. The skills needed to answer questions about a sentence, like remembering details, might be similar to skills used in some of the cognitive tasks, which could explain the links they found. The study also found that older adults consistently showed stronger syntactic effects. The researchers suggest this might not be due to standard cognitive differences, but perhaps how older adults approach the task itself, maybe their motivations or goals are different when reading. This opens up an interesting avenue about how our personal goals and how we engage with a task can influence how we process language. Even with all the detailed measurements and analyses, the study highlights a major challenge: the reliability of individual differences in syntactic processing. As they put it so perfectly, individual differences in the syntactic effects are still unreliable. This means that many of the subtle differences we see between people in how they process sentences are hard to measure consistently. They explain this isn't because the group effects aren't real, but because individual effects are just really noisy and hard to pin down. This is a significant methodological hurdle for future research. So, what does this all mean for us and for future research? Well, it confirms that people are definitely different in how they process language, but it also shows that the reasons for these differences are more complex than we once thought. It's not a simple case of smarter equals faster reader. The connections are more nuanced, especially between online reading speed and cognitive abilities. This research really underscores the importance of careful, large-scale studies when looking at individual differences. It suggests we need to think about how we measure these cognitive and experience factors, and how the tasks themselves might influence the results. The findings about comprehension accuracy offer some intriguing clues about how our cognitive resources do play a role. Just perhaps not in the way we initially expected. It seems like the story of why we all read differently is still unfolding, and this study gives us a clearer, though more complicated, picture of the challenges and opportunities ahead. It makes you think about how your own brain handles a difficult sentence, doesn't it? Let us know in the comments below what you thought of these findings and how you experience processing complex sentences. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating explorations into the human mind.